Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Wynonna Earp. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I should talk about this. Is it me, or does the show seem like dirtier and even sexier than before? It's crazy. For one, I feel like Wynonna has been on a spree with like all the sex innuendos she's been making and stuff like that. To be fair, it's not like that's always been a part of her character since the beginning, but I just feel like it's been like rapid fire these past episodes. I feel like I notice them from time to time, but I feel like I really noticed them this episode. I was like, holy shit, like Wynonna's got like her dirty mind is in overdrive this episode. Just like what was it? Because, like, even the girl Rachel was like, do you have to, like, turn everything into a sex joke? She's like, I can, you always got to find time to scissor one in. I'm like, dude, she's like, boom, 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 rapid fire with it. It's crazy. Obviously, her and Rachel are trying to find a way to get to the lower levels. And I also love how this episode did a really nice job, like, mind-fucking me a little bit. Because I was like, because at the beginning, I was like, the way she was acting, she was naked when Hot was in front of Doc and she was naked. He's like, oh, whoa. He's like, I'm not looking, but he's taking a peek or whatever. And he's basically saying, like, oh, he's seen so many women. It's kind of not that big of a deal. It's like water off a duck's back or something like that. And she's like, I am not a duck. And he's trying to hand her the coat, but he can't give it to her. I'm like, she can't get out. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And then immediately I was like, oh man, I was super wrong last episode. I guess that really is, I guess that totally is, Nicole then. But then, like, Doc has to run and go get Waverly and explains everything. And it's like, how is she? Is she okay? And Doc's basically like, oh, I'm sure you're going to like her when you see her. And you see her and everything. And she also got the tree wrapped around her, kind of like very Adam and Eve style. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But then, like, I like that it does not front with you too long, because she's like, yeah, I mean, it's like, but the moment she starts kind of like bagging on other people, and it's like, oh, and then she says the line of, who else would it be? I'm like, wait, are you? And it is like, nope, I was super right. It totally wasn't Nicole. But just that beginning made me second guess myself. I was like, oh, I guess I was wrong. I guess that really is Nicole. I guess she dropped down and it's like, nope, the real Nicole landed. Luckily didn't die. She broke her leg, but she didn't die. But I'm like, that's so interesting. But then I wasn't too surprised, because it's like, what was it? She said, she was like, did you guys ever like ask Bouchard why he wanted to try and get into the garden? Which basically, Waverly's like, we were on the assumption that he was just trying to play God. And I thought that was so interesting. The moment, like, she starts rattling off about, like, oh, how God basically abandoned humanity and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, are you Eve? And later on we find out she is. I was like, that's so interesting. Because now, let's not forget, Bouchard was the serpent, so he's the one that tempted her. But then again, she talks about the fact is that she was evil to begin with. So it's like, was she evil and she got locked in the garden beforehand, or was she evil after Bouchard's influence? Like, was he trying to reunite with Eve because that was his love? Was he trying to unleash her on the world? Like, that is the thing. We know he wanted to get in the garden. We never knew beyond, like, what else did he want for them? Because, like, Eve, obviously we see that she's a shapeshifter, but, like, what is her story? Once again, it's so interesting because it varies from different shows, because obviously Lucifer has its own thing with Eve. She's never actually popped up in Supernatural, has she? You would have thought she would have. I'm fairly certain she hasn't popped up at all. Which all this does beg the question, it's like, well, what about Adam? Like, in this continuity, it makes you wonder, is there, I'm assuming there is one, but it's like, was Adam like an angel and she was a demon? Was this kind of like some spoilers, some like almost borderline Genesis thing coming on, the union of demon and angel? Like, I'm curious, like, and maybe that's why the garden is what it is, because the garden isn't supposed, maybe it stopped being the paradise it was after Bouchard, tempted and made, like, but that's what I'm saying, like, because she talks about the fact is that she's darkness, so maybe that's what she represents, like, kind of like, once again, I'm using all these weird examples, like Supernatural, how, like, Chuck was kind of supposed to be the light, and his sister, was kind of like supposed to represent all darkness. So what if like Eve is supposed to be like that? And once again, the question then becomes, like I keep saying, like, was it something she was prior to all this or after? But you can tell it just didn't necessarily 100% sit right with Waverly, because she could just tell Nicole wasn't really acting like herself. It's like, oh, Doc becoming a vampire, was it really for us, or was it just because he was afraid to die, but then it's all connected because like the machine needs to be fed blood, because even the guy last episode, I completely forgot about it until they brought it up. They're like, oh, the guy said that this isn't a garden, it's a prison. So I guess that means people like Juan Carlo and Julian were in the dark. Yeah, it's so interesting that the people who were supposed to be protecting it are in the dark about it. I mean, to be fair, Julian never stepped foot in it. He just protected it. He just kind of did his job, which I think that's kind of an interesting aspect to the show. Like, everyone's kind of got this lineage, this job they're supposed to do, and kind of almost not ask questions about it too much, you know? But the fact of the matter is, because it seemed like the only people that know what's up is like Kevin and everyone else. Like Kevin and her people seem like they know, which I'd assume after all this, we probably would see Kevin again. Maybe, I don't know. I'm curious in the grand scheme of things. Once again, I'm all over the place, so I do apologize. But Wynonna, circling back to it, Wynonna and Rachel are trying to like find the key cards, which obviously all the key cards are around the necks of all the zombies. I should also mention, like, that's also an interesting element to this too. Rachel and Wynonna are kind of hitting it off. Like they're like two peas in a pod and stuff like that. Like just like the back and forth that they had and stuff like that, I thought was kind of interesting. Like they gel together well personality wise. It almost seems like Rachel's like a young Wynonna, because even she was like, oh, you're more messed up than me, and she's like, I'm the one that had a rap for a best friend for the past 6 months, you know. But luckily they get to the bottom. They're getting all those cards, ID cards, key cards and everything. And Wynonna's kind of like getting delirious from the lack of oxygen. And she's like, after like knocking some zombies out, she's like air humping. I'm like, what the... I mean, to be fair, she's not in her right mind at the same time. But it's at the same time, it's like, even though she's not in her right mind necessarily, that seems so Wynonna, you know? So... they end up getting down there. They end up finding Hot, locking the door. But then they also find Rachel's mom. She dies, her hand on a switch, trying to keep the portal from being open. And so Rachel pulls her gun on everybody. And it's like, okay, so truth time. Wynonna already knew your mom was dead. But the fact of the matter is, we're in this to kind of save someone we care about. Like, we're willing to, like, hurt or kill whoever they have to if it meant getting to, you know, the people, you know, Doc and Waverly, obviously. There was also this touching moment. I even love that moment where it's just kind of like, it's like she's it's like she's my friend, and Wynonna's like best friend, and she turns to look at Nicole, and Nicole doesn't really say anything. She's like, see, she already said that, so no takes back. She already said it once, so no take backs, right? It's like, you can't take it back. You're besties. It's official. But I thought it was like, you know, super sweet, where it's just kind of like, because she brought Bullshar's ring, or rather Julian's ring, and gave it to her, and it was like, basically Nicole was making a joke of like, basically I'm already taken, but it's like basically Wynonna ends up referencing like the like sex, the hot sex that they be having, the hot premarital sex that Nicole and Waverly have all the time. And Nicole's like, you were listening? Which I'm like, maybe some of the time, I guess that's supposed to imply maybe like she was being a pervert and listening, but at the same time I'm like, well, we've heard a couple of times over the course of the show. It's not like you've been subtle about it. You and like Waverly have been going at it like crazy to the point you can hear it that Wynonna was like, I need to get out of here. You know, regardless, you know. But it's like, you know, will you make my sister an honest woman? And it's just like, oh, besties and sister-in-laws, you know, soon to be sister-in-laws. So I just think that's just kind of a beautiful moment between Wynonna and Nicole. But they were able to convince Rachel to kind of just let them go by because they needed to protect the person that they care about, you know? Because obviously Wynonna knows what it's like not having your mom at such a young age. She's like, but you kind of have to grow up, you know, without them or whatever, you know? Especially for her because even Rachel has said it herself, like if her mom was then she would, you know, put her down if she need be. She just needed to find her mom to have an answer, you know, whether or not she was alive or not. But they luckily are able to open a portal after Wynonna makes some more sex jokes. And because every time she's like, she says something and then she's like, toggle it. She's like, all right, you're right. I keep making everything into a sex joke. But luckily they get the portal open. Meanwhile, you know, Doc is racing back to Waverly because he found out about Eve. And when Waverly ends up kissing Eve, she tastes sulfur, which I'm wondering what that's all supposed to be about. Maybe that's something supposed to be demonic related, but whatever the case may be, doesn't seem like it. Because I I was curious about that though, like why specifically Nicole? But I guess it's because you needed a form that would be enough to drive both of them to want to get you out. But once again, I guess, once again, my thought was because Waverly used her own blood, it gave Eve an excuse of like, oh man, who was she focusing on the most? She wasn't focusing on Wynonna. She was focusing on Nicole, but we saw Eve shapeshift into Jeremy and into Wynonna, so it must be anyone that she can pull from Waverly's memories. That's what I'm kind of thinking. Maybe not. I'm curious what would have happened if Doc had fed his blood to it, because it seemed like all this was a byproduct of Waverly giving her blood. You know, obviously she was able to. Eve was able to get free because they didn't get feed blood in time. So, nevertheless. I also loved when Doc was fighting Eve, but she was looking like Jeremy, and it's like, oh, and even during the fight was kind of complimenting. It's like, I'll have to compliment the real Jeremy on his physique. Right now, this is getting a little tiresome, like the fight and everything. But it also seems like when she does take over possession of people, she does seem to know what they know, because she's like, oh, my head is filled with all these like worthless pop culture references. Like because Doc defending it, being like, it's not worthless or pointless. It shows that he has something. I forgot what the word was at Doc, but he was trying to defend the fact that Jeremy had so much quote unquote useless pop culture in his head. I also love when Wynonna did show up too. She saw her other version and she's like clone. I forgot. Damn it, I'm forgetting so much. It was like a clone pun on Wynonna. And then I think she also made an Orphan Black reference. Because she was like, Orphan Whack. I was like, wait, was that an Orphan Black reference? Holy shit. Because I think it shows Canadian. Because I know Orphan Black is, I think, labeled as Canadian as well. I think it's a Canadian show as well. So I think maybe that was supposed to be that. Which is interesting night-wise, because obviously Tatiana Maslany, one of the stars of Orphan Black, is on Perry Mason. So I just kind of got that stuck in my mind already. But I just thought that it's because like Eve was like, I'm going to get from here and I'm going to basically skin people and I'm going to strangle them in their own skin. And Wynonna was like, ew, gross, Jesus. Which is, I'm like, yeah, that is hardcore. Her fighting Doc and everything. Him calling her a harlot. She's like, you like that about me. Because basically at the same time, Waverly had her angel instincts. Like, her instincts are driving her to the throne of like, this is what I got to do to make sure that Eve doesn't escape. And Doc and Wynonna are fighting, and it's like basically Wynonna says their safe word, which I think is interesting. I mean, it makes sense for them to have a safe word, but you know, she tries to mention Alice to be like, yeah, like our daughter, it's really me. And then they're making out, and she's like, do we have time for this? And Doc is like, alas, we do not. Let's get to Waverly. And it's up to Wynonna to get her off the throne, because for her, it's like, this is my destiny. She's like, I am the heir. And then you have like Wynonna be like, oh, not this shit again, basically. I was like, that's so interesting, because this is her duty as an heir, but Wynonna's probably tired. You know, Wynonna's tired of it. It's like, our family it's gone through so much BS because of this whole heir business. Wynonna had so much to do, you know, go through, having to send her daughter away because of all of it, all the heartache it's caused her and Waverly and their entire family. It cost them their sister, you know, so. But in a grand scheme of things, like, it took Wynonna showing her Julian's ring, and it's just like, but she didn't even say yes. It's like, trust me, we go back, she will say yes. At the same time, you know, they set up some interesting stuff with, because I do apologize bouncing back and forth, but like, they set up some interesting stuff with Rachel, where she talks about the fact is of like her family lineage, that basically she's basically descended from like a Mayan warrior, very Xena-like, as you know, Nicole kind of references. The fact that they set that up means that's going to turn into something. So it's interesting because Wynonna kind of being an heir, even though she's technically not the heir anymore because the curse is broken, but then Waverly kind of being an heir of her own, and then potentially we might be setting up Rachel to be an heir of some sort. Maybe not. I just feel like the fact that they had that mention wasn't just a family thing. That must going to circulate in some shape or form. Maybe not. But what I thought was fascinating though, like, I forgot what it was, like with the bomb and everything. It's like, oh, I can't believe Rachel made some reference to the beaver bomb, and then like Hot's like, don't worry, I'll teach you how. And it's just like, once again, I'm like, this show is completely filthy, and I love it. I was like I said, I just rewatched season 3. Yes, there were sex puns and innuendos, but I'm like, I don't remember it being this heavy with it. I'm like, holy shit, this show has gotten dirtier and dirtier. It's nuts, you know. Oh, my sweet virgin ears can't handle it. But nevertheless, Doc did kick Eve through one of the doors. Now, where that door leads, who knows? Because obviously Eve's trying to get to the Ghost River Triangle, so either that took Eve out of the Ghost River Triangle or somewhere else in Purgatory. I'd assume so. But luckily, Wynonna was able to get Waverly off the throne. Because once again, it's just like all of this has kind of cost them so much, and she was obviously wasn't going to leave her sister. So luckily, they reunite as like the garden's kind of potentially shutting down or whatever. They go through the gate. And they wind up in Purgatory. What I thought was fascinating, though, is they literally land in 3 different spots. I'm wondering why they ended up in the areas they did. What was it she said? Garden of Eden, more like Eden. Was it more like eating us or something like that? Or eat us? I'm like, oh, Jesus. I love that, though. Rather than like action catchphrases, it's dirty action catchphrases. Regardless. But I thought like Wynonna ended up at the stairs. Doc ended up at the well. And I'm like, that's very interesting. He's like, oh, the well, but not in it. There's also, because Doc ends up having Waverly's bag, and there's a book. And let's not forget, she was looking at that before Doc had returned. So I'm like, okay, so what is that? Like, once again, whose book did she get? Because I'm sure, once again, I referenced the Magicians last episode, like how everyone has a book in the library that talks about, like, oh, your entire life, your beginning, middle, and end. So I'm assuming once again, it's only 4 people's books that were there. So whose did she take? She might know the ins and outs of somebody's fate. We'll kind of have to wait and see. But the moment Waverly got there, she was like, goes back to the homestead. Lo and behold, who's waiting for her hot? I noticed in me, I was like, she's not limping. I was like, is something? Because I was thinking, like, did they end up there at different times? Because it just had that feeling to it. And then we got a very explicit sex scene. Granted, it's not explicit, but I was like, holy shit. Like, I didn't expect there've been sex scenes before, but I was like, yo, they went hard on that one. I mean, not like I'm complaining or whatever. I just thought that was interesting. I was like, holy shit, that's a very, that scene showed way more than I was expecting. I was like, oh shit, that's nuts. That's crazy. I legitimately had to pause. I was like, whoa, that was getting real hot and heavy. Holy shit. Because this show isn't, it's had sex scenes, but they've never had any like that. I know I'm rambling on about it, but it's just like, holy shit, it legitimately caught me off guard. I was like, oh, all right. Getting some deep, passionate love right there. Holy shit. But then, the way it happened and everything. Well, I mean, to be fair, it also lends itself very nicely to the fact is that, oh, they've been going, because Waverly was like, how long have we been going? It's like you've been going it's like you've been going 18 months, which I think is very interesting because I think that's almost a show's way of setting it in 2020. I think that's interesting that they did that. Like, I wonder, did they compensate for the fact is that the show didn't air last season, so now it's airing this year, so that was their way of compensating for that, or was it always supposed to be the way things went? Regardless, I just thought that was fascinating. Also, Doc and Wynonna are in town, and it's like there are people hanging up, and it's like, wait, what? Because Hot was like, she came back after, with the busted leg and everything, and she tried to handle things in Purgatory. But let's not forget, most of the town is gone. The only person that was left was Mercedes and Natalie. Other than that, there probably wasn't too many people to help defend. And so it's like, who came and took over town? I'm assuming whoever took all those people at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of last season. I mean, at the end of last season, at the beginning of this season, once again, is it Black Badge, someone else? I'd assume. We didn't get to see it, but it also begs the question, what about Rachel? I'm assuming she's there too, because the whole thing was don't leave her alone. So they probably, it's aside from the beaver bomb, it's how did you get out of that situation? The odds were super against you, but now it's okay, so how much has changed in this past 18 months? A lot of questions. I'm very excited to get some answers, hopefully, next episode. I'm curious to see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. good day and goodbye.